Hawthorne Hall had never lost power, not once in 6 years. Not during storms, not during heat waves, not when the rest of campus flickered like a dying screen. So when the lights cut out at 2:37 p.m. on a random Tuesday, people laughed at first. Someone JD hunted dorm. Someone else blamed the power company, and the whole building treated it like an unexpected break from homework. By evening, it wasn't funny anymore. Phones were at 30%. The elevators were dead. The hallways smelled like warm carpet and old paint. The emergency exit signs glowed red, but the generator that should have kicked on never did. Hawthorne Hall wasn't just dark. It was excluded. Ethan sat on the steps outside the lobby, watching the sky turn orange behind the library tower. He kept checking his phone, not because it would change anything, but because it was the only thing that made him feel like he still had control. Mason was pacing nearby, hands shoved into his hoodie pockets like he was trying to hold himself together. Tyler had found a half-melted candle from an RAS emergency kit and kept lighting it, blowing it out, lighting it again. The flame made his face look older, like a campfire ghost story in progress. Connor leaned against the wall and pretended not to care, but his eyes kept flicking upward toward the 7th floor windows. That's when Mason said, "We should go up." Ethan looked at him. "Up where?" Mason nodded toward the roof access door at the end of the corridor. "Roof? At least there's air. In there it smells like a wet shoe." Connor scoffed. "You're really trying to make this into a horror movie." Tyler smirked. "Bro, it already is. No power, pitch black dorm, candles, where one violin screech away." Ethan should have said no. He should have gone to his friend's apartment off campus. He should have left Hawthorne Hall behind and let maintenance deal with it in the morning. But something about the building felt stubborn, like it was waiting for someone to notice. So they took the stairs. 7 flights. No lights, just phone flashlights bouncing off the walls, making every corner feel like it was leaning closer. The stairwell was colder than it should have been. The air had that metallic taste you get right before a storm. And every time Ethan turned his flashlight too fast, he thought he saw movement in the shadows. By the time they reached the roof access door, their jokes were thinner. The door was supposed to be locked. It always was, but tonight, the handle turned easily. Mason pushed it open. A gust of wind hit them like a slap, cold and damp, carrying the smell of rain and something else. Something like wet leaves left too long in a bag. The roof was wide and flat, scattered with ventilation units and water tanks that looked like giant sleeping animals under the moonlight. In the distance, the campus was bright. Streetlights, dorm windows, the glow of the cafeteria sign. Hawthorne Hall was the only dark shape in the middle of it. Tyler walked to the edge and stared down. "That's actually insane. Look, everything else has power." Connor climbed onto a low concrete ledge and shrugged. "Maybe the building's old. Maybe the generator died." Ethan didn't answer because he noticed something that made his stomach tighten. On the roof access door, on the inside, someone had scratched a word into the paint. Not carved deep, not with a knife, more like with a key or a nail. One word. "Stay!" He stared at it until Mason followed his eyes. "What's that?" Mason asked. Tyler leaned closer and squinted. Someone's idea of a joke. Connor laughed, but it didn't land right. "Yeah, a very original joke." Ethan's mouth was dry. That wasn't their last semester. Mason swallowed. "Are you sure?" Ethan nodded. "I'd remember." They sat in a loose circle near one of the water tanks, using Tyler's candle as the only warm light. The moon was a thin curve in the sky, like something half smiling. Wind rattled the metal vents. Every now and then, the trees below swayed and whispered against each other. Tyler rubbed his hands together and said, "Okay, this weather, perfect time for stories." Connor rolled his eyes. "No?" "Yes," Tyler said. "Absolutely, yes. We have one candle, a blackout, a creepy roof door that says stay. It's illegal to not tell a story right now." Mason hesitated. "I don't really..." Tyler pointed at Ethan. Ethan does. Ethan's always got some weird campus trivia. Ethan frowned. I don't? Yes, you do, Connor said. You literally told us about the library basement tunnels. That's real, Ethan said. Okay, then tell us something else real, Tyler said. Something about Hawthorne. Ethan stared at the candle flame. It made shadows dance behind them, stretching the water tank into a taller, stranger shape. He wasn't sure why he said it. Maybe because the building already felt like it had a story, and he didn't like the silence. He said, Hawthorne wasn't always a dorm. Mason's eyes lifted. What do you mean? Ethan looked out over campus. It used to be a hospital wing, like a long time ago, before the new medical center was built. It wasn't huge, but it existed. People got treated there, people died there, and then it got repurposed when they expanded housing. Connor laughed softly. Every building on a college campus used to be a hospital. That's like a rule. Ethan didn't smile. No. Like there was a fire. Tyler leaned forward. Okay, now we're talking. Ethan's voice lowered without him meaning to. I read it in an old campus archive thing. The fire was in the upper floors. The elevator stopped working. People got trapped. It happened fast. Mason stared. When? Ethan shrugged. I don't know. Decades ago. Connor waved a hand. See? Fake. If it was real, it would be on Wikipedia. Ethan opened his mouth to answer, but stopped, because the candle flame moved. Not flickered. Moved. It leaned sideways, like someone had exhaled right into it. But none of them had. Tyler froze, watching it. Mason's eyes darted around. Connor's smile faded. Ethan felt the hair on his arms lift. Wind, Connor said. Too quickly. Tyler swallowed. Wind doesn't do that. That was like a breath. They all went quiet. The wind above them was steady, but it didn't swirl. It didn't gust. It didn't feel like it came from any direction. And then they heard it. A sound, low and distant at first, like a door being dragged across a floor. It wasn't on the roof. It came from below, from inside the building. Mason's voice was barely audible. Did you hear that? Connor stood up, suddenly alert. Probably someone in the stairwell. Tyler pointed toward the roof access door. Then why is it coming from inside? Ethan stared at the door. The word stay looked darker now, like it had absorbed the candlelight. The dragging sound stopped, and then, from somewhere beneath them, a single knock echoed upward through the roof. One knock. Like someone knocking from inside a box, Tyler whispered. No. Connor tried to laugh again, but it was thin, shaky. Okay. That's maintenance. That's a pipe. That's a second knock, then a third. Slow. Deliberate. Mason backed away from the door. Guys, let's go down, right now. Connor looked toward the edge. We can just climb down the fire escape. Ethan's stomach flipped. What? Connor pointed. There's a ladder on the side. We can get out without going back inside. Tyler's voice came out tight. Fine. Great. Anything but that door. They moved together toward the edge. Toward the far side where the fire escape ladder should have been bolted to the wall. Ethan remembered it. Everyone did. It was the place freshmen dared each other to hang over during orientation week. But when they reached it, the wall was bare. No ladder, no bolts, no marks where it had ever been. Just smooth concrete. Connor stared like his brain refused to accept it. What the hell? It's right here. It's literally always right here. Tyler ran his hand along the wall like he could find it by touch. No. That's not possible. Mason's breathing got shallow. Maybe we're on the wrong side. Ethan looked around. The roof wasn't that big. There weren't multiple sides to confuse. They were exactly where they were supposed to be. Connor stepped back, looking around wildly. Okay. Fine, we go back down the stairs. Tyler looked at the roof door. The handle was turning, very slowly, from the inside. But they were on the inside. They were already on the roof side. There should not have been anyone else touching that handle. The metal clicked once, like a careful test. Mason grabbed Ethan's sleeve so hard it hurt. "Ethan, we're the only ones up here, right?" Ethan couldn't answer, because he realized something else. There were footprints on the roof. Wet footprints. They weren't theirs. They came from the roof access door, and stopped in the middle of the roof, like whoever made them had stood there for a long time, facing the water tanks, facing the spot where they were sitting. Tyler's candle shook in his hand. "Weren't there before?" Connor whispered, "Stop. Stop doing this. This is a prank." But nobody was smiling. The handle turned again, and the door began to open. Just a crack. Darkness pressed through it like liquid. Not normal darkness. Not the kind you get when the lights go out. This darkness looked thicker, like it had weight. Tyler stumbled backward, and the candle nearly went out. But the flame held on. Trembling, Mason said, "Close it. Close it." Connor surged forward and shoved the door back with both hands. It shut with a heavy slam that rattled the metal tanks. For a second, nothing happened. Then, something on the other side of the door scratched lightly. 3 short scrapes, like fingernails. Tyler choked out, "Nope, nope, I'm done. We're leaving." Ethan's mind raced. There had to be a way out. The fire escape was gone. The door led into the black building. They were trapped on top of a silent dorm that didn't have power but somehow had something moving inside it. Then Ethan's phone vibrated. Everyone froze. Ethan looked down. A notification? No service bars. No Wi-Fi. His phone shouldn't be getting anything. But there it was. A text from an unknown number. Just one message. "You came up." Ethan stared until his eyes watered. Mason whispered, "What is it?" Ethan showed them. Tyler's face went pale in the candlelight. Connor's jaw tightened. Mason shook his head. "That's not funny." Ethan's hands were shaking. "It's not from any of you." All 3 said no at the same time. Another vibration. Another text. "Don't look down." Tyler swallowed hard, eyes flicking toward the edge of the roof, as if the message had pulled his attention like a hook. Connor grabbed Tyler's shoulder. Don't do it," Tyler whispered. "Why would it say that?" Ethan's throat felt tight. "Because maybe something wants you to." Mason's voice cracked. "Guys, we have to go inside. We have to get out of here." Connor stared at the door like it was a mouth. "And go where?" "Down into that." The scratching stopped. Silence. Then a new sound. A soft, slow humming, coming from behind them. From the water tanks. Ethan turned first, and his heart slammed against his ribs. Because there was someone standing by the largest tank. A figure. Tall. Still. Facing them, they couldn't see a face. The moonlight didn't land on it, right? It looked like it was made of shadow, but not the same shadow the night made. This shadow was too clean, too solid. And it was humming, a tune that felt familiar in the worst way, like a lullaby you can't place but your body remembers. Tyler whispered, "That's not a person." Connor's voice was barely there. "It's a prank. It has to be." The figure stopped humming and spoke. The voice didn't come from a mouth. It came from everywhere around it, like the roof itself was talking. "You're late." Mason's eyes widened. "What?" The figure tilted its head slightly, the movement unnaturally smooth. "You're always late." Ethan's stomach dropped, because he wasn't sure if it meant them or if it meant Hawthorne Hall. Tyler's candle went out, and in the instant the flame died, the campus lights around them seemed too dim too, like the world's brightness had been lowered. They stood in moonlight only. The figure took one step forward, and Ethan heard something behind him, the roof access door opening again. A slow, patient creak, like a room finally deciding to let you in. Mason began to sob quietly, his breath breaking. Connor clenched his fists. Tyler fumbled for his phone. Flashlight. Hands shaking so badly he dropped it once, twice. Ethan didn't move. Because the figure wasn't coming closer to attack. It was coming closer like it expected them, like it had been waiting. Ethan's phone vibrated again in his hand. One more text. Now you stay. And then, from the stairwell opening behind them, something climbed. Not footsteps, not shoes. A wet, dragging crawl, getting closer. The figure by the tank whispered, "Our most Rentley Hawthorne doesn't like being ignored." Connor snapped, voice cracking with panic. "What do you want?" The figure turned its head toward Connor, slow as a clock hand, and answered, 4. Ethan's breath stopped. Mason whispered, "For what?" The figure didn't respond, because it didn't need to. The roof access door swung fully open, and out of it came darkness in the shape of a person. But, brung, its limbs didn't bend correctly. Its head tilted too far. It moved like a puppet in water, pulling itself onto the roof, leaving wet footprints that steamed faintly against the concrete. Tyler screamed and ran. Straight toward the edge, straight toward where the fire escape ladder should have been. Connor shouted, "Tyler!" But Tyler didn't stop. It was like he couldn't. Like something was pulling him forward with invisible hands. Ethan ran after him, but the distance felt longer than it should have been. Like the roof had stretched, Tyler reached the edge, grabbed air where the ladder should be, and his fingers clenched on nothing. He looked back once, eyes wide and glassy, as if he'd just realized what he'd done. And then, he stepped backward, off the roof. Ethan lunged and caught his hoodie. For 1 second, Ethan felt Tyler is a full weight. And then, Tyler was gone. Not falling. Not dangling. Just gone. Like the air had swallowed him. Ethan stumbled backward, staring at his empty hands. Mason screamed Tyler's name into the night. Connor stood frozen, face blank with shock. Ethan's phone buzzed again. A message! 3! Connor backed away, shaking his head, whispering, "No. No. 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 No." The shadow thing from the stairwell began to crawl toward them. The figure by the tank watched calmly, like a professor observing an experiment. Mason grabbed Ethan. "We have to jump to the next roof. The library annex is close. We can make it." Ethan looked. There was a lower rooftop nearby, separated by a gap. It wasn't impossible, but it was deadly if you missed. Connor shouted, "I'm not jumping. I'm not." The crawling thing moved faster. Connor turned and ran. Not toward the edge this time, toward the roof access door, toward the darkness inside Hawthorne Hall. "Connor! No!" Ethan yelled. Connor reached the doorway and stopped like he hit an invisible wall. He jerked back, stumbling, and Ethan saw why. Inside the stairwell, in the blackness, were faces, not one. Dozens, pale faces stacked behind each other, like people pressed against glass in a crowded elevator. All of them staring out, all of them smiling too widely. Connor screamed and tried to turn, but the crawling thing lunged, grabbing his ankle. Connor hit the ground hard, nails scraping the concrete. Ethan sprinted toward him, but the figure by the tank lifted its hand, slightly, just a small motion, and Ethan's legs locked, like his muscles stopped taking commands. Mason screamed, "Move!" Ethan tried. He couldn't. Connor was dragged. Not quickly. Slowly, it moved across the roof, inch by inch, dragging itself toward the stairwell, toward the horrified faces watching. Connor clawed at the rough surface of the roof, his fingernails tearing, leaving streaks of blood behind. He was begging, sobbing, choking out Ethan's name. Ethan's entire body shook with a desperate, primal effort, but he was frozen, pinned by a force he couldn't see or understand. The crawling thing pulled Connor into the darkness of the stairwell, and the moment Connor vanished from sight, The heavy roof access door shut with a soft, gentle click. It was an unnervingly polite sound. Just then, Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. A single word on the screen. 2. Mason was breathing in ragged, panicked gasps, like he was about to pass out. His eyes were wide, wild with terror. "It's counting," he stammered, his voice cracking. "It's counting us." Ethan whispered back, the word barely escaping his lips. "Why?" Mason shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "We're not supposed to be here." The shadowy figure standing by the water tank took a step closer. The air around it grew colder, heavier, pressing down on them. "You came up?" it said again, its voice even softer this time, almost a caress. "So, you'll stay." Suddenly, Mason grabbed Ethan's wrist, yanking with a surge of adrenaline-fueled strength. The invisible pressure holding Ethan down released. He stumbled forward, shocked, and Mason pulled him hard toward the edge of the roof, toward the gap between their building and the next. The annex roof was close. It was close enough to look like a real chance, a desperate hope. Mason's voice was urgent. "On 3, we jump. Don't think about it. Hoost, jump." Ethan could only nod, his heart hammering against his ribs so hard it was physically painful. Behind them, a slow, drawn-out creak echoed from the stairwell door. It was opening again. The sound was hungry, Mason whispered, his eyes locked on the gap. The figure's voice drifted over to them from the darkness, as calm and soothing as a bedtime story. "You're late." Mason's breath hitched in his throat. Ethan stared at the gap. The drop below it was a pitch-black throat, promising to swallow them whole. 3. They ran. They launched themselves into the air. For a single, terrifying moment, Ethan felt utterly weightless, suspended between life and death. And then his hands slammed into rough, sharp gravel. He hit the annex roof and rolled hard, his shoulder exploding with pain as it hit the surface. But he didn't care. The pain was real. It was life. He scrambled to his feet, turning, desperately looking for Mason. Mason had made the jump too, but he hadn't landed right. He hit the very edge of the roof with his chest and was now just barely hanging on, his legs dangling over the open air. Ethan lunged forward and grabbed Mason's arms. Mason's fingers were already slipping on the loose gravel. His face was a mask of pure terror. Ethan grunted, pulling with every ounce of strength he had left. Mason gasped, his voice strained. "It's pulling me!" Ethan screamed, his voice raw. "I've got you!" But then Mason's eyes flicked past, Ethan looking at something behind him, just for a second. And his expression changed. The fear was gone, replaced by something else. Recognition. As if he saw something he knew, something familiar. Then Mason whispered, the words so quiet they were almost lost to the wind. "Ethan, don't look!" Ethan's phone buzzed again in his pocket. He didn't check it. He didn't need to, but his body, against his will, did exactly what the text had warned. His head turned looped down, and far, far below, in the suffocating darkness between the buildings, there were lights, but they weren't campus lights. Not street lights. They were small, pale, sickly lights, moving together in a swarm. They were rising, hoopward, and as they got closer, a horrifying realization dawned on Ethan. They were faces, dozens of them, pale, disembodied faces floating up from the black void, their mouths stretched into wide, silent smiles, their eyes empty and staring, rising toward Mason like a cluster of macabre balloons. Mason screamed, a true, soul-shattering sound. His grip slipped. Ethan grabbed harder, digging his fingers into Mason's jacket. But Mason's body was jerked downward with an impossible force, as if something invisible had hooked him from below. Mason cried out one last time, "I'm sorry," and then he was pulled from Ethan's hands. He didn't fall. He didn't drop. Was? Takin snatched down into the silent, waiting space between the buildings. Ethan crawled to the edge, sobbing, shouting Mason's name until his throat was raw and burning. But there was nothing, no sound of impact. No scream fading into the distance. Just an absolute, crushing silence. He sat there, shaken uncontrollably, gasping for air that wouldn't come, staring into the dark abyss that had claimed his friend. His phone vibrated one last time. A final message. 1. Ethan felt like his lungs were collapsing. He couldn't breathe. He slowly, fearfully, looked up. Across the gap, the roof access door on Hawthorne Hall was open again, and the figure stood there, watching him, still and patient. It didn't have to cross the gap, it didn't have to chase him. Because Ethan finally understood, this was never about being trapped on the roof. This was about the building itself, deciding who was allowed to leave. The figure spoke one final time, its voice a whisper carried on the cold night wind. Now you're on time. As if on cue, the campus lights flickered back to life. A distant generator hummed somewhere below. The lobby lights of Hawthorne Hall clicked on, warm and inviting, as if nothing had ever happened. Ethan stumbled off the annex roof and found the emergency stairs, running, sobbing, half collapsing as he slammed through doors. He finally burst out onto a campus walkway where other students were standing around, laughing and filming the power coming back on with their phones. Someone shouted, "Finally," another person said, "Told you it'd be back." Ethan turned and looked back at Hawthorne Hall. It looked completely normal. Brightly lit windows, a living, breathing building. There was no darkness spilling out, no faces in the sky, no bloody footprints on the roof, no sign of Tyler, no sign of Connor, no sign of Mason. His phone buzzed one last time. It wasn't a text message. It was a notification from the campus housing app. Maintenance update. Power restored at Hawthorne Hall. Thank you for your patience. Ethan stared at the screen, his mind reeling. And then the screen changed all by itself. A new message appeared, with no sender listed. Welcome home. Ethan looked up at Hawthorne Hall, and there, in a 7th floor window, someone was standing, watching him, a dark silhouette. Still, waiting. And behind that silhouette, he could just make out other faces, pressed close against the glass. Smiling